Welcome everyone to the It's Official podcast. Jeremy Plonk here for First Bet and Express Bet. The long and winding road to Kentucky Derby 151 makes its final stop in Louisville, Kentucky this Saturday. We've got the ultimate preview for you here. We're going to talk pace. We're going to talk prices. We're going to talk projections, everything you want to get set for the run for the roses. I'm solo this week. Of course, Jeff Siegel, our handicapper extraordinaire, will be in the first wager guide for the Kentucky Derby. So be sure to check out the Kentucky Derby wager guide that we have live for you right now at news.first.com in our blog section. You can click on the link there or at expressbet.com. Check out our wagering guide for the Kentucky Derby. Get Jeff's analysis for this year's run for the roses. Millie Ball, Michelle, the whole team of first handicappers there to help you along with the first wager guide. So again, be sure to download that today. Free access for the wager guide, and you get workouts, you get all kinds of information, stats and trends, biographies on all 21 entrants in this year's Kentucky Derby. And that's where we're going to start things off, talking about those 21 entries. Our first of 5 topics on the big board this week: the Kentucky Derby posts and pace. Post positions were drawn Saturday at a ceremony at Churchill Downs, and how might that impact the pace scenario of the run for the roses? Let's start off by taking a look at the field for the Kentucky Derby. 21 are entered. Beza is the also eligible here at number 21. He would need a scratch by 9 a.m. on Friday. That's the scratch deadline on Oaks Day, Friday morning at 9 a.m. in order to draw into the field. If that lavender saddle towel looks familiar, Rich Strike wore the 21, got in on Oaks Day, and went to the winner's circle just a couple years ago. So Baeza, he needs a little help to get into the field. We'll talk about him a bit more, and all these contenders as we go throughout the course of the program. But as for the winners and losers from the post position draw, I think there's a couple different takeaways you can look at. The favorite journalism drew very well in post position 8. It's a good spot to be in for a horse to kind of be in the middle of the gate like that, who has a bit of mid-pack and tactical speed. You don't want to be hung too wide. You don't want to be buried down on the inside and have all the speed come down on you. So I think journalism, one of the winners of the post position draw. I thought Sovereignty out in post 18 for his deep closing style. That's a good spot for him to be in. He's the second favorite in morning line, made by Mike Battaglia at 5-1. Sovereignty's going to drop back, start to work himself over and save some ground there. So being wide won't hurt a horse like that in terms of his tactics and his situation. The same goes for Sandman, number 17. I thought Sandman was one of the winners of the post position draw. We're going to take a look at him in action at Churchill Downs and his final breeze here for the run for the roses. Sandman's a horse who's getting a lot of steam. We'll talk about that in another segment, but being out in the 17 for him is a good spot to be. He's had a little bit of trouble at the starting gate in some of his races, so he's a deep closer. If he has a little trouble at the start of the Kentucky Derby and gets shuffled back, it doesn't totally knock him out stylistically, and being towards the outside, if he runs into trouble, it won't be a massive chain reaction as if he was down on the inside. So being towards the outside, that's a good thing for Sandman. If you like him, I'll drop the hint now, I really don't, but if you do like him, Sandman, I thought he was a winner in the post position draw. This is a good spot for him to be in. Cole Battle's got a little bit of speed to his inside, should be breaking. Sovereignty, no speed to his outside, so it should be a pretty clean spot, you would think, out there. I thought Sandman, one of the winners of the post position draw. Another horse I thought got a very good draw in here is number 12, East Avenue. East Avenue is a horse who got back on the beam last time out when he won at Keeneland, or he almost won at Keeneland. He led all the way in the Toyota Bluegrass and got nailed on the wire. He's trained pretty forwardly, but he's trained like a horse who's going to show speed in the Kentucky Derby. Being in the 12 hole, I think it's a good thing for East Avenue in this spot, because all the other speed in this race seems to be drawn down towards the inside, except the horse that he was dueling with at Keeneland and being Oh No Almighty to the outside. So East Avenue, this particular workout here, trainer Brendan Walsh is coming off a fantastic meet. Brendan Walsh tied for the leading trainer title with Brad Cox at Keeneland with 10 victories. Just a tremendous number for that barn, going up against Brad Cox and Wesley Ward at Keeneland. So you know his barn is going exceptionally well right now. And the fact that East Avenue bounced back as well as he did after 2 very subpar efforts, one this year in the Risen Star, one in the Breeders' Cup last year, kind of a sign of the barn. East Avenue's going well right now, and he goes well in this workout here as he gets outside of a mate, and this is how he's going to get the trip in the Kentucky Derby, because The speed is to his inside. He's going to be right up into that mix. Maybe he goes to the front. We'll talk about the full pace scenario here in just a moment, but he gets to get a trip like this, maybe tracking outside of some of that inside speed, and that's an advantageous place to be. You can be a little more comfortable with your mount there with the open spaces to the outside. So I thought East Avenue, one of the winners of the post position draw. Let's go back now to the field once again. So as we mentioned in post 12 there, East Avenue, he's got a situation here where all of the speed in this race is to his inside. So we're going to try to look at the other speed horses in this race. The 20, Owen Almighty, has plenty of early speed. The 12 has early speed, but the inside runners really could cook in here. Citizen Bull, Neo Equus, Rodriguez, American Promise, maybe even Admire Daytona from Japan, who went to the lead last time out in a slower run race in the UAE Derby. But certainly 4 of those inside 5 runners could be part of the early pace mix, and that's a good spot for East Avenue. It's not necessarily a spot for those 4 of 5 inside runners. So I think the losers of the post position draw in here probably the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 5, and maybe even the 3 Final Gambit. Although he's a big-time closer, he's never raced on the dirt. So Final Gambit, who might drop back as far as last in this field, is going to take all the dirt. He's a cray, and he's going to be the dirtiest sucker you've ever seen in the winner's circle if he's able to come through and win this year's Kentucky Derby. I'll drop another hint for later in the podcast. Don't count out that possibility. So Final Gambit, a loser in the post position draw, but a horse who may get a good pace set up because as we talk, the 1, the 2, the 4, the 5, all with the early speed. The 12's got early speed. The 20's got early speed. These could be horses that really set the table for some off the pace types. So let's go now to our pace scenario. This is how I map out the pace. I'll show you in just a moment, but I take 4 categories of potential spots in a race for a horse. Speed, a horse who goes right to the front. A presser, or a horse who wants to kind of be second or third and right up into the mix. A mid-pack runner who kind of falls in the middle. Not a deep closer, not a horse with pressing or elite speed. And then the closers, the horses who are going to come from well off the pace. Some people call them sustained runners. But I go with SPMC, speed, press, middle, closer. And I make a little diagram of my past performances, whether I'm doing the 4th race at Keeneland or I'm doing the Kentucky Derby. How does the SPMC line up in this race? Try to project where you think a horse will be in each spot in the race. And early on, this is where I think they'll be going down the backstretch of Kentucky Derby 151. This is my pace prediction, not based on any speed figures, not based on any times and clock, because I think as much intent is big a deal in early pace as natural speed. All of these horses, given most of them, can run fast for a half mile. It's who's asked to run fast the first half mile who ends up near the front. Citizen Bull to the inside. East Avenue, the 12 we talked about. American Promise, Neo Equus, Rodriguez, Owen Almighty. Those horses we've already talked about as 6 potential front-running speed horses in here that if any one of them didn't go, another could step forward and lead this race. I didn't think Admire Daytona is going to be as sent to the front in American racing as he was to just taking advantage of that Japan to UAE move on the dirt in the UAE Derby. So I think he's going to sit just behind the main speeds in this particular spot. Which of the speed horses goes to the front? That's a difficult thing to say. Actually, talked to my buddy Jeff Siegel by text right before recording the podcast, and we talked about Citizen Rodriguez, an interesting dynamic amongst the speed horses here. The 1 and the 4, both trained by Bob Baffert. Jeff doesn't think that they're going to go after each other. Whichever one breaks best is going to be the one who ends up assuming the lead, and that there'll probably be no direct instructions given here. So Citizen Bull on the rail and Rodriguez the 4. Which one's naturally more quicker between the two? There could be a discussion on that because Citizen Bull was kind of given the lead in a head-to-head race where Rodriguez was already in that going back in the Bob Lewis Stakes where they made Rodriguez kind of sit second. But he showed in the Wood Memorial last time out that Rodriguez is a legitimate pace player, and he's a horse who, if sent to the front, can be very difficult to beat in this Kentucky Derby. He was fast early, very fast late in that race in the Wood Memorial, so I'm not so sure that they concede the front to Citizen Bull, but Marty Garcia on the 1 Citizen Bull, he's got to go. There's just no question about it. He's got to get out of there. I went and looked at some statistics from the rail. Now, remember, the starting gate for the Kentucky Derby used to be a gate of 14 and then an auxiliary gate with 6 more stalls. Because of the connection of the 2 gates and the tires, there was a bigger gap between the 14 and the 15 posts. And then the rail was, the whole gate was wider as it is than it is now, as the 20-horse gate is more narrow because there's no gap anywhere there. So there's a little bit more room to the inside. It's not as dangerous the first couple jumps against the rail for the horses who draw the 1-2, but it doesn't get any easier about 20, 30, 40 yards into the race. I went back and looked at all 5 replays since 2020. We had 5 derbies now run with the new starting gate. Only 1 horse got away unscathed, and that was Hit Show. The other 4 all had some sort of trouble early in that mix. And we're not talking about bad horses who got kind of roughed up on the rail here, talking about Florida Derby winners like Known Agenda. We're talking about eventual Belmont Stakes winners, Dornoch last year and Mo Donegal a couple years before that. 2 of the last 3-4 horses who have drawn the rail in the Derby and had rough trips came back and won at Belmont, or at Saratoga last year, but came back to win the Belmont Stakes. Mo Donegal, of course, winning it at Belmont Park before their renovation, and during the renovation, Dornoch last year winning the Belmont at Saratoga. So it is tough down on the rail, and if you don't get away, which none of those 5 horses from the rail got away quickly, you start to see a shuffle back. So you end up, okay, maybe I'm 5th, 5th out of the gate, and that's not so bad. But then when the whole field starts coming down, there's this shuffle back. And next thing you know, you go from 5th to 13th to 14th, and you're completely out of your game. That will happen to Citizen Bull if he doesn't break sharply in this race. So he could end up 13th or 14th if he tries to break with any kind of patience. He's got to go. And so I think you're going to see some speed from the inside, obviously. Neil Equus has to go in post 2 back to the chart. And, these other horses from the outside, Owen Almighty's going to come cooking out of there, of course. East Avenue is geeked up in his works. I think he's the kind of horse who's going to show plenty of speed as well. So as far as the pressers go in this particular race, you've got Admire Daytona. This is the trip you really want in the Kentucky Derby. This is kind of the American Pharoah, California Chrome. Remember that run of horses, Nyquist? They all kind of came from about the same spot and really kind of had a dominant run when favorites were winning the Derby. You'd love to have a favorite kind of in this spot. But Admire Daytona, Baeza from the outside, he would be post 20 if he gets in the gate, if there's one scratch. So he's got a tough go from way out there to kind of get into this position if he can, but that's where he would prefer to run. Cole Battle could fall into this position. Then you get to the middle runners. Could they be used a little bit more early? Grande, Journalism, Luxor Cafe, Burnham Square. I could see any one of those 4 horses being a little bit closer to the pace than necessarily what the projection is here. But they're somewhere in that middle, maybe press category, certainly not to the front. Now, Burnham Square, the way he's been training, he looks like a horse who's going to be geeked up in here. I know he's a closer on form, but this horse is training like a powder keg. Burnham Square's turned a lot of heads at Churchill Downs in the last week or so. On the same podcast last week, we looked at his work 2 works back, and I thought he was too eager early and not that strong late in the workout. He is trained and looked better since then, but just look how he's getting into this workout over the weekend. This one on the 26th, and Burnham Square, for a closer, this horse is just getting right into it. He is a powder keg right now, as is Citizen Bull, the rail-drawn horse we talked about. If there are 2 horses who are tipping their hands that they are absolutely ready to explode, now this might not be a good thing, but they are ready to explode on Kentucky Derby Day. It's Burnham Square, and the other visual would be Citizen Bull. But for Burnham Square, exploding early is against his running style. He's a horse who likes to come from off the pace and finish. His closing late brisk pace figures aren't that strong, though, however. So if he gets up into the mix and he's kind of too geeked up in this race, Burnham Square could be in a no lead, no pass situation. You see the jock here, Brian Hernandez, keeping him absolutely glued to the rail. That's what Hernandez likes to do. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get with Burnham Square, kind of the trip Calvin Burrell got a few years ago a few years ago. I'm dating myself now, but back in 2010, 15 years ago when he won with Super Saver. He was kind of mid-pack, 4th, 5th, 6th, glued to the rail and did what Calvin Burrell does. I think that's what kind of ride you're going to see from Brian Hernandez Jr. on Burnham Square. I think he's going to be a little bit closer to the pace than a lot of people think. Right now in this projection, you've got 6, 7, 8 in front of him, probably, maybe 10 in front of him. But if he's geeked up and they go after it, I would not be shocked if Burnham Square is kind of up into that, second flight, 6th, 7th down the backstretch. I could see him, the way he's training, the way he's geeked up, Burnham Square could be in that kind of position. And from post 9, he's in a pretty good spot to be there. The problem for that, though, is Luxor Cafe and Journalism are horses who I think want similar kind of trips. And Luxor Cafe's in the 7, Journalism's the 8, and Burnham Square's in the 9. I'm not quite sure how he navigates down to that rail and gets up into that spot that he wants with some of those others with similar running styles. That's why I still kept him behind those in my pace projection. But we'll see. I mean, if it's rider intent and somebody really goes for it, you could see those runners up a little bit closer. And I think that first over move is the one you want to make. Admire Daytona, I don't know if he's good enough at a mile and a quarter the way he finished on the back end very slowly at a mile and 3/16 in the UAE Derby. I don't know if he's a good enough horse to take advantage of it at a mile and a quarter. Baeza from the 20 hole, if he gets in, what's he going to have to stretch? Good in the Santa Anita Derby, but he's very lightly raced, and it's going to be a difficult post to work out that kind of trip. And then you got Cole Battle. He came home slower the final 3 furlongs in the Arkansas Derby than any of the 21 horses on this list. He had the least left in the tank after chasing the fast pace in the Arkansas Derby. I can't see him taking advantage of it. So if you're looking at the speed horses, we've got 6 of them up front. If you don't like any of them to kind of wire the field and go with it, and really to me, the only horse in there a threat to win this race on the front end would be Rodriguez. Then the middle horses get the first run on all the closers, right? And when the speed starts to fall and collapse and come back through the field, you can just kind of see as the speed comes back in the race, who's going to be that first wave of horses to kind of take over midway on the far turn to the top of the stretch. And that's where that mid-pack group is that is so talented. You talked about Burnham Square, Journalism, Luxor Cafe, Grande. You've got some good horses in that group before the big late closers come calling. And in the closers category, certainly you've got some of the horses that everybody's going to have on their tickets in this year's Kentucky Derby, because in that group of closers, as we go back to the list, you've got Sovereignty, you got the Asmussen pair of Publisher and Tistastic, you've got Sandman, and then you've got a long shot play perhaps with Final Gambit. One note of a horse in here in the middle of the pack, we're going to talk about Chunk of Gold a little bit later in our long shots and potential long shot segment coming up. So let's put him on ice right now. Chunk of Gold on ice as we move to our second topic this week after discussing the post and the pace of this year's Kentucky Derby. Topic 2 this week on It's Official. It was a last call for workouts. You've seen a couple of them on video already. Let's take a look at some of the favorites and see how they're trending up to the Kentucky Derby. For full workouts from their works 2 weeks ago, over a week ago now, you can check out last week's podcast in the archives. These are the workouts from this past weekend and some as recent as this morning here on Tuesday as we record. Let's go back to the final work for Journalism. Journalism, of course, the favorite for this year's Run for the Roses. He's 3-1 in Mike Battaglia's morning line. This is his only workout for trainer Michael McCarthy over the surface here at Churchill Downs. He trains in Southern California, and you say, wow, he's never taken his game on the road. But in his 4 victories that he's had in a row, they've come over 3 different tracks and pretty distinctly different tracks: Del Mar, Los Alamitos, and Santa Anita. So he's had no trouble taking his track to different venues, and the footing, of course, it's a much easier race to run out of your home stall or van over to Los Al for a race than to go halfway across the country to Kentucky. However, he has no problems adapting to different footing. And I think that's the key point to make. He's had some versatility, even though running just on one circuit in Southern California. That certainly didn't hurt California Chrome, Silver Charm, many very good Southern California horses, Justify, who have come east without ever racing on another circuit prior and had success in the Kentucky Derby. Journalism working very easy here under Umberto Rispoli. It was a whirlwind weekend for Rispoli. They were going to work this horse on Saturday, but the track was wet and sealed. And so trainer Michael McCarthy said, let's wait another day for weather. Rispoli was to go back to Southern California to ride for the day at Santa Anita. He got in all kinds of flight cancellations, ended up sticking around till Sunday and working this horse, and just a very easy loping move here. But this horse looks good. Everything's put together. He's striding out nicely, and he's going to gallop out tremendously. Kevin Kirsten does a really good job. Horse Racing KK on X, if you want to follow him from Churchill Downs. But he's done a great job putting together data on all these workouts. I mean, you look at Journalism splits in this race. He worked 101 and 2 for 5 furlongs. Nothing special there. But he galloped out another furlong, 12 and 2. Then he galloped out another furlong beyond that in 12 and 2. And he galloped all the way out to a mile in 141 and 1. That's working out to the kitchen, as they say at Churchill Downs, because the track kitchen's kind of at the end of the backstretch as you go into the far turn. And you see he's passing all the fans on the backstretch here, and he's still galloping out as well as some of the other workers we're going to see gallop out into the clubhouse turn, and he's already passing the track kitchen back there. So Journalism doing absolutely tip-top going in to the Run for the Roses. As for Sovereignty, the second choice in the morning line, he's been a little bit more high-strung. Now, he's turned heads and he's done some things impressively, but behaviorally, he really wants to go. And in this workout, trainer Bill Mott, his final work, put him with a workmate and, to kind of give him a little bit of a target instead of, maybe just not doing enough or potentially running off without a workmate in here. He stays outside the target, but he was very eager to go. The good thing about this workout for Sovereignty is he wasn't all lathered up and worked up like he was earlier in the week. He was getting hot and sweaty earlier in the week, and you wondered if he was kind of taken to the new surroundings and acclimating well to Churchill Downs, but he seems to have put it together later in the week. We still got a couple more days to go. Of course, this podcast recorded on Tuesday afternoon. We saw the training through this morning with them. All systems look good to go with Sovereignty, though. I don't think there's a big knock on anything that he's done so far in the morning. Keep an eye on him pre-race. If he gets lathered up and worked up in the walkover, there's a chance if you're not making your bets until 20 minutes to post, you'll get a better feel for how he's behaving on Derby Day. But he is working absolutely beautifully here. He ended up galloping out 1:15 for the 6 furlongs. Not a huge gallop out in this one after working in 1:01 and 4, but his prior work was super strong here. Mott didn't need much. They put away an overmatched workmate, and that was the way it was supposed to be. Just an easy gallop out here. You see the way he's galloping out now is kind of the way Journalism was galloping out around to the kitchen. But Sovereignty absolutely doing well, and I wouldn't have any big knocks with him. The one of the other favorites to consider perhaps would be Rodriguez. Let's take a look at Rodriguez in action. This was over the weekend. Rodriguez for trainer Bob Baffert. Rodriguez, the horse, of course, won the Wood Memorial in his most recent start. And he's a horse who I thought this work was on Monday, I believe. Good work from Rodriguez in this spot. 5 furlongs at a minute flat. Splits in here were rock solid. 12 and 2, 24 and 1, 36 and 1, 47 and 3, and then finished up the minute and 1/5. Rodriguez just kind of taking his time getting into the work. Now we noticed, like with Citizen Bull, geeked up to go, right? We talked about it with who was the other horse who was so geeked up to go? Burnham Square. This horse just loped to the pole. That's what you want to see, where they're going to start the work. Rodriguez, he was supposed to work 5 furlongs to the wire, but a rider in here, I think, got a little bit of a late start. I think this is the work. No, that was the Citizen Bull work where Martin Garcia got him a late start to the pole. But Rodriguez works really well here. He's coming up to the race the way you want to see it. Of the Bob Bafferts, he feels to me the more dangerous and trustworthy of the two, the least likely to implode. And of the horses on that 6-pack of potential front runners, maybe a 7th if the horse from the UAE shows speed in here or somebody else. But of the 6 potential speed horses, he seems like the one most likely and capable of delivering at the end. He ran his last 1/8 of a mile in the Wood Memorial in 12:47. That was 5th best in this field, according to the numbers I've been able to crunch, and got a triple-digit brisk late pace figure. That's impressive after leading on the front end. So Rodriguez coming off one of the best prep wins. He has done nothing wrong in his training to make you dissuade from him. The 3 favorites, Journalism, Sovereignty, Rodriguez, and of course Sandman being the other 4th favorite who's kind of right up in that mix in the discussion in the top 3 wagering choices. Rodriguez doing well. The question amongst that group might be Sovereignty getting a little hot, but when in motion, Sovereignty has looked excellent in the training. So look, we're trying to knock off some favorites in this year's Kentucky Derby, and we haven't found a lot of loopholes to try to knock them off in terms of workouts. That's a look at some of the workouts of the American horses in recent days. Now, this morning we had the Japanese on the track, and if you follow me throughout the course of this year, you follow my Countdown to the Crown series, which I put out every Friday. This week, countdowntothecrown.com. I'll have the scouting report released on Thursday if you want to download and check that out. 20th season for Countdown. I've been really high on Luxor Cafe for a long time, ever since basically January, February, when the Triple Crown nominations list came out. I'm scouring, okay, who from Japan intrigues me? And he was the first name that jumped off the past performances. Been following his races very closely since. I have a lot of respect for Luxor Cafe's races in Japan. Now, I don't know the competition and the strength that he beat in those necessarily, but I do know this: 2 horses that he beat, 3 horses that he beat in the Hyacinth Stakes went over to the UAE Derby, including the winner, Admire Daytona, who's here in the Kentucky Derby. So if we have a little international kind of strength of schedule, the horses he beat ran pretty well in the UAE Derby that he beat in the Hyacinth. Now, the Hyacinth was a 1-turn race. His 2-turn race next up was the one that was just eye-popping, and this is what really kind of put me on to Luxor Cafe. So his race in the Fuca Rio Stakes was exceptional. So I couldn't wait to see him on the track and do something. He's been here a couple days at Churchill Downs, came out of quarantine as USDA regulations, require, and he didn't do a whole lot in the first couple days. So today was the first day we got to see Luxor Cafe put in a time move and actually kind of get out of first gear a little bit. He didn't fly in here, but let's pick up the work for Luxor Cafe this morning. Again, courtesy of the Churchill Downs media team. So thanks to the video staff there at Churchill Downs for all the great workout information, and Kevin Kirsten with a lot of the splits and the times, doing a good job from the media department there this week at Churchill to get everybody covering the Kentucky Derby up to speed and fans up to speed with how these horses are training. Now, not a lot of interest early in this breeze. Obviously, they're just going along and they're just cantering. Look, this is not going to be a fast workout for Luxor Cafe. Not planned to be, and it just turned out to be the same time for 5 furlongs that both Japanese horses worked. They both worked in 1:02 and 2/5 seconds, both kind of running a little bit more in the middle of the work, going off easy, picking it up a little in the middle, and not really coming home super fast in here. But here's Luxor Cafe finishing things up this morning. Now, before you say there's not much to this work, there's not a lot of meat on the bone, that's true, but it's not a case to eliminate this horse off this work. You see the ears up, he's happy, he's finishing up nicely, not asked for anything in the gallop out. Maybe you'd like to see a little bit more gallop out of Luxor Cafe, but remember last year, you probably don't, because people kind of have a last 15 minutes thought frame anymore. But last year before the Kentucky Derby, Forever Young came over here and worked 6 furlongs in 1:16 and change, which is, like molasses in December pouring slow. Terribly slow workout. And he came 2 noses short of winning the Kentucky Derby. They train different, the Japanese horses. So don't overemphasize what you saw here. The one thing I wanted to see of this horse in motion was, would he look like a wet rag on the track? Would he be all wet, washed out? Were there any negative signs? I didn't think we go into this work this morning with Luxor Cafe and get any real positives. The positive is he stayed composed. And in fact, they went to the starting gate after a timed workout, did a little gate schooling. They walked him around on the track for a long time afterwards. He stayed out on the track as long as anybody during the training hours, just kind of routine. And so that shows you a pretty good mind for a horse to be asked to open it up a little bit, open the throttle up, and then go stand in the starting gate and gate school after that. That's really rare. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it. So really, I think what you got mentally today from Luxor Cafe was a thumbs up. Did you get anything on the track that made you say, oh, he's blazingly fast? Probably not. But I can tell you one thing that makes him pretty fast, Luxor Cafe. The final 3 furlongs of the Fuca Rio Stakes, and this is from GPS tracking in Japan, 36.30. 36 and 1 he went. The back 3 furlongs of 1 mile and 1/8. The final furlong in 12 flat. Is absolutely flying on the dirt. The fastest dirt come home time of any horse on the Triple Crown Trail this year at a race 1 mile and 1/8 or longer belongs to Luxor Cafe, according to the GPS from the Japan racing sites. So Luxor Cafe can finish. We'll see if he can finish the Kentucky Derby, right? Can he get a little bit more that last year they came up just a little bit short, different connections, but with Forever Young. Luxor Cafe, very, very interesting, and today didn't do anything to dissuade that. Admire Daytona was the other Japanese horse on the track this morning, worked 5 furlongs. He came over a little bit earlier because he was already out of Japan, went to the UAE Derby, and instead of staying in Dubai, they just left Dubai because there were planes coming back to Kentucky already. Brad Cox had some horses running on the Dubai World Cup card that were coming back to the U.S., so he was able to hop a plane there. And so that's why Admire Daytona got here much earlier than what we saw with Luxor Cafe. It's not like Luxor Cafe was hiding out in the boonies and avoiding the situation. It was just the other horse had already traveled. There's no sense going from Dubai all the way back to Japan, all the way here, when there was already flights coming to Kentucky. So it was a good setup for Admire Daytona to get there earlier. So he's done a little bit more work over the track, and he did the same thing this morning. 5 furlongs, 102.40, 102 and 2/5. So the two Japanese horses, we will see. I just think with Admire Daytona, he was very slow late in the mile and 3/16 race, the UAE Derby. He won that day, but they came home very slow. Luxor Cafe came home very fast in a mile and an eighth. And certainly on pedigree, the one is by Dre Fong, a champion American sprinter, that being Admire Daytona. The Triple Crown winner, American Pharoah, with an outstanding Dan Marie's Follies, is the Kentucky-bred pedigree for Luxor Cafe. I just think he's much better bred to go a mile and a quarter, and he's finished up his races better. So of the two Japanese horses, they worked the same time this morning. Still, to me, a major edge to Luxor Cafe as we take on our second topic this week. Let's go now to the big board for topic number 3 on It's Official, the Derby underlays and overlays. Let's start to talk some betting here. We're only a couple days out from the Run for the Roses. Underlays, for our newer fans out there, are horses whose prices are shorter than what I think, or what you might think as a handicapper, the relative chances of winning are. So if you think a horse should be 5-1 in their chances of winning, and they're 2-1, that's an underlay. An overlay is a horse you think should be 2-1 and is 5-1. So the price is overlaid to what you think it should be. You want to find overlays in this game. You want to avoid underlays. That's the bottom line when you're gambling. So I put this list together of potential underlays and overlays, and it's not necessarily based on their morning line price with all of these horses. As far as the underlays go, the 17 Sandman, I thought he was a winner in the post position draw, but he hasn't come home particularly fast in his mile and an eighth race. When he won the Arkansas Derby, he was really just middling, almost 13 seconds for the final furlong in that race. Only got an 88 brisk late pace figure. I don't think Sandman closes as strong as it looks on the racetrack. I think he's had some races that have fallen apart. He's had some trouble at the starting gate in some of his races, not all of them. If he gets in trouble again and gives himself more work to do, I think he's an underlay price at 6-1. And one thing about Sandman, it sounds hokey, but it's real. Names matter in the Kentucky Derby. It's the only race in the world where names probably matter, maybe in some other countries, but the only race in America where the name of the horse matters. Sandman's a cool name. They've got all the Metallica people, the Enter Sandman, the social media presence. Sandman's got an owner who's a major influencer with millions of followers on social media. There are a lot of reasons people are going to be betting Sandman in the win pool of the Kentucky Derby that may not correlate to how often he's used in an exacta, in a trifecta, or in a pick 3 or a pick 4 or pick 5 that runs through the Kentucky Derby. But in the win pool, we've seen this over the years. You know, My Boy Jack, one of the most famous horses. Everybody named Jack in the history of the Derby that year bet on the horse to win. Pants on Fire was a name that kind of took a life of its own leading up to the Derby, and everybody completely overbet those horses. My Boy Jack, Pants on Fire, they should have been like 50-1 shots in their respective Kentucky Derbies. They get bet. And so Sandman, I think, is going to be a horse who's an underlay. He may go off second wagering choice. He's third choice line at 6-1. Let's go back and review the odds here real quick of the entire field, and you'll see Sandman in he's post 17 is at 6-1. Sovereignty's the second choice by Mike at 5-1. I don't disagree with that on talent. I don't know what the hype factor is going to be on Sandman in terms of the name, the social media influence, that sort of thing in the win pool. If you're looking at prospective daily double will pays going into the Kentucky Derby or exacta combinations using various horses, I think Sovereignty absolutely will be the second most popular horse in the gamblers realm for the Kentucky Derby. But in the win pool where there's casual money, remember the Kentucky Derby is the only race this year where you're not going to be betting against the big heavyweights necessarily. There'll still be calls and there'll still be major league bettors in the Kentucky Derby, but there are a lot of school teachers. There are a lot of bus drivers. There are a lot of people who only look at the racing form or the program or the names once a year for the Kentucky Derby, and that money is significant in the win pool, not necessarily in the tries, the supers, and what have you. If you like Sandman, I implore you, do not bet him to win. He's going to be a tremendous underlay price to win. If you like Sandman, get to him in a pick 3 or a pick 4. Get to him on top in an exacta or trifecta, superfecta, whatever play you want. If you like Sandman, you need to leverage the pools that the general population aren't really swimming in. You got to go against the whales, maybe more so, but the whales may not like this horse. People like me, I'm not saying I'm a whale, but people like me who handicap steadfastly can find more flaws with Sandman than a lot of the casual observers will. And therefore, he's not going to be bet as the second favorite in a lot of those pools, but he will be probably in the win pool, or he's going to make a strong run at it in the win pool. So going back to our overlays and underlays, I wanted to explain that. It's not necessarily a major critique of Sandman, other than the fact that in the win pool, he is going to be much shorter. Burnham Square, I don't like the geeked up nature that he is running right now. He did not finish with any kind of flair at the back end of that race. In the Bluegrass Stakes, I was a little down on him, and he's trained like so visually sharp that everybody's talking about him. He's the buzz horse on the backstretch, and he's the one that a lot of the Kentuckians want to win. Ian Wilkes is, a lovable trainer. He's been the assistant trainer on a couple Kentucky Derby winners back in the day, on Bridled in 1990, Street Sense in 2007. There's a lot of sentiment for Ian Wilkes to win the Kentucky Derby from the Kentuckians. But I think he's going to be, if he's 12-1, I think that's too short of a price. The Bluegrass winner hasn't won the Kentucky Derby since 1991. It is 34 years now. I can't take a shorter price on Burnham Square. Fair odds, the way he's training, to me, closer to 25-1 than the 12. As for Baeza, he's a horse who may or may not get into the race. If he gets into the race, this is kind of a catch-22 in terms of calling him an underlay. 12-1 in the morning line may not be a bad price. He only got beat a couple lengths last time out to Journalism in the Santa Anita Derby. He's a lightly raced horse, has much more ceiling, right? The good things can happen to him. But if he gets into the field, he's going to be in the 20 post. That is no cupcake out there, especially for an inexperienced horse, a horse who wants to kind of be in that stalking, mid-pack pressing kind of position. He could get hung wide. So it could be a tough trip for Baeza from the 20 hole. And I think the salty bettors are going to kind of bet him. I think there's a lot of people who like him from Southern California, but at the same time, also eligible horses kind of get forgotten. People kind of like don't look at the scratches and changes. I mean, believe it or not, it actually is true. And so a lot of times the also eligible horses don't get bet like they should. And even in the Kentucky Derby, I remember I wasn't going to bet Rich Strike no matter what, but there was just like no thought process to those horses even getting into the field and how we evaluate things. That kind of taught me a lesson a few years ago of not considering Rich Strike at all going into the race, that you have to consider your AEs like they're running in the race. And that's why we include him in the field graphic, why we include Baeza in the potential pace scenario, because if he's in, we want to be prepared. Don't be underprepared for an AE. But I think he'll be too short of a price for his relative chances of winning the race. Now you could say, how can 12-1 be too short when Journalism's 3-1? They're pretty close together. Journalism just has so much more foundation. 4 straight stakes races around 2 turns with big wins, big brisk late pace figures. There's a lot cooking there for Journalism. He's got a much better post position, the 8 hole versus the 20. I think there's a wide swath in terms of win chances between those two horses, no matter how close they were. Now, if Baeza doesn't make this race and shows up in the Preakness next, I might pick him on top in the Preakness. I'm not saying he's a bad horse. And if the Preakness goes with 8, 9, 10 starters and he draws well and he's the fresh horse, he could be your Preakness horse. I wouldn't be shocked at all. So, but from the 20 hole with Baeza, I want at least 20-1. I don't think he's going to be 20-1, and nor maybe should he be 20-1. But in my estimation, and I'm putting fair odds on horses, I want 20-1 if I'm taking a horse from the 20 hole who's only been in one stakes race like that. We haven't seen him outside of Southern California. A lot of question marks there. Flavian Pratt would ride Baeza if he does get in the race. And then Neil Equus will be looking for a new rider. He has first call on Baeza if that runner happens to draw into the field. As for some of the others, in terms of the winners and losers, in terms of the underlays and overlays, I should say, I think East Avenue's a little bit of an underlay at 20-1 in the morning line. He's got speed and a good post, but I just can't see him lasting on the front end. I think he'll be higher than that. Publisher at 30 to 1 in the morning line wouldn't be an underlay. I think that's a fair number. The problem is I don't think Publisher is going to be 30 to 1. He's getting a lot of talk, but he's still a maiden. Remember that. He's never beaten a horse, or he's never won a race. He's beaten horses. He's run second and third a lot, but he's never won a horse race yet. And so if you're going to take a horse who's had multiple chances at winning already in Publisher, I mean, he's been to the post. Steve Asmussen's 0 for 26 in the Kentucky Derby. He's got the worst record in the history of the race at this point. Publisher's run 7 times. He is a son of American Pharoah, a Kentucky Derby and Triple Crown winner. He is a grandson of Pioneer of the Nile and Proud Citizen, both runners-up in the Kentucky Derby. There's a lot to like about Publisher in this race, but he's never won, and he's coming out of some of those same slow-finishing races in Oaklawn, the Southwest, the Rebel, and the Arkansas Derby that didn't come home particularly fast, but he's getting a lot of talk, and he's really outworked his stablemate, Tistastic, head-to-head a couple times. I think Publisher is going to be somewhere in the 12 to 15, 16, kind of the 1 range. And to me, that's way too low. That's why I think he's an underlay. If he's 30 to 1, he's interesting. And if you're playing tries and supers, he's interesting, 3rd or 4th. But I couldn't play Publisher at 12, 15 to 1 in the win pool no matter what. And I kind of think he is going to get bet probably in half of that morning line. If he's not, then maybe you still take a shot with him at 30 to 1. As for the overlays, horses in the morning line that I think are better than their prices indicate, we've already talked about Luxor Cafe. You know how much I like him finishing up things. And we talked about how fast Luxor Cafe came home in that race, the Fuca Rio Stakes. It was the fastest come-home time for any horse on dirt in the mile and an eighth or longer races. I put together a list of all 21 horses in this race and what they ran their last 3 furlongs and what they ran their final eighth of a mile. Luxor Cafe was the fastest of the dirt horses, but the fastest of all horses was Final Gambit. He's another horse at 30 to 1 in the morning line that I have on this list. He for potential overlays. He came home in 36.10, a full 1/5 of a second faster than Luxor Cafe came home, and he came home 2/5 of a second faster over the final eighth of a mile in 11 3/5. Now, we did not have GPS tracking for the Jeff Ruby Stakes, so I timed everything off video. But after doing it multiple times yesterday and into the evening, I feel pretty comfortable with the numbers that I came up with. Even if I'm off by 1/10 of a second here or there, maybe he's not quite as fast as Luxor Cafe. Maybe he's a little faster, but he's definitely faster than everybody else in their come-home times. No question about it. Now, Final Gambit is a horse who's 30 to 1 in the morning line. He lost the post position draw, right? We talked about that in the winners and losers, because from post 3, everybody's going to be kind of coming down on him. Again, take a look at this field. And from post 3 in here, Final Gambit, he's got speed in the 1, 2, 4, 5. And then the rest of the field is going to start coming down on him. He's probably going to be 19th or 20th. And as we put the field graphic up, that's why I've got Final Gambit. If you go all the way to the right on the bottom, I think he's going to be dead last into the clubhouse turn because of that inside post position. He's a deep closer anyway. From the outside, he could kind of take his time and work his way down and kind of pick a comfortable spot, not getting a lot of kickback thrown at him. But Final Gambit's going to have to deal with a ton of kickback for post number 3. He is going to be one dirty hombre with that gray coat taking the dirt into the clubhouse turn. The best case scenario for Final Gambit is not only to be last into the clubhouse turn, but to be about 5 lengths behind the 19th place finisher. I mean, dead ass last is where you want to be with this horse, because when the kick up all comes back and everything like that, it flutters to the ground and it lands before it ever gets to him, and he can kind of run freely. You'll see horses on sloppy tracks have some success that way too, where the splash and everything kind of hits the ground before it gets to them. The ones that are kind of up at the back of the pack and kind of running up on other horses get all that kickback and get extremely dirty. Final Gambit from post, all the horses coming down to try to save ground into the clubhouse turn. He's got to drop way back and then try to make one run with it. But the way he closes, he's a very interesting horse. I don't think he can win the Kentucky Derby, but he is in that profile of horses who have won the Kentucky Derby, right? A lot of years, it's the best horse, best trip, goes on and wins the Kentucky Derby, right? I mean, we've seen it over time, Justify, American Pharoah, California Chrome. When good horses get the right trip, they usually don't give it back in the Kentucky Derby. If Journalism gets a really good trip in here, he'll probably win the Kentucky Derby. But when things get goofy and the wheels fall off in the Kentucky Derby, the big long shots are almost all stereotypical rallying closers up the inside. You go back to Mind That Bird. You look at Rich Strike a couple years ago. Giacomo came from down the middle of the track, but came from well back in the Kentucky Derby field. The big bomb long shot upsets in the Kentucky Derby, the anatomy of an upset is a deep closer and a horse who, is just going to circle the field when they're dog tired. That could be Final Gambit. If there's a horse who wins this year's Kentucky Derby at 20-1 or more, I think it'll be Final Gambit. Otherwise, I think the logical horses really kind of have a reign on this year's group. That's why I put him in the overlay category, and I think you are looking at a really, really nice price on a horse who can get a good part of the Tri or the Super. People will probably use him in the Tri and Super. He's the only Brad Cox entered in here. Grays, I mean, if you get back into the, maybe you don't get the price you should on a gray horse because a lot of people bet the grays. That could be a factor a little bit in there. That's also a factor, of course, with Sandman. But I think you're going to get a fair price on Final Gambit. If he's around that 30-1, that's an overlay price. I think he's got a reasonable chance in here amongst the long shots. And then finally, Chunk of Gold. This is the last one I'm going to mention in this category of the overlays and underlays. I think Chunk of Gold at 30-1 is another one in that category right behind Final Gambit, that if a horse 20-1 or more wins this Derby and you say, how in the hell did that just happen? It could be Chunk of Gold. And the reason is we talked about some of these horses who have won coming up the inside. Even Mystic Dan last year, he was kind of a middle price, but certainly not one of the favorites in the Derby at all. Brian Hernandez just stuck to the rail. Calvin Burrell, think of all those Burrell rides, and some of them with good horses like Street Sense, some of them with no hopers like Mind That Bird, but right up the rail. Sonny Leone aboard Rich Strike, right up the rail. There's a shot in here for a jockey to give a don't give a damn ride is what I'm going to call it. The don't give a damn ride is I'm staying on the inside no matter what. And usually the guys who are willing to get that ride in the Kentucky Derby are your journeyman riders, not your big name, not your prima donna guys, not the guys who are already millionaires and showing up the track in a Rolls Royce. Calvin Burrell, as blue collar as it gets until his stardom late in his career. Brian Hernandez Jr., same way. You saw with Sonny Leone, a jock from Ohio, essentially, coming up the rail, winning the Kentucky Derby on Rich Strike. I think it takes that kind of personality, the don't give a damn personality, to get stuck down there. The big name riders don't want the danger. They don't want I got the horse stopped. It's my fault we lost. If Chunk of Gold stays to the inside, if he can work out an inside trip, Jareth Loveberry rode 2 fills brilliantly in the Kentucky Derby a couple years ago. He could get that kind of trip. And he could be a horse who gets into the mix, maybe not win the Kentucky Derby, but this is a horse I think that you want to look at, perhaps. Chunk of Gold from the Louisiana Derby. The race didn't come home that fast. I'm not ecstatic about this year's Louisiana Derby, but historically over the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's been no more productive race. Almost every single year, the last 6 or 7 years, a Louisiana Derby horse is in the exacta tri or superfecta in the Kentucky Derby. So he's coming out of the right races. He's kind of got the right rider. The question is, I wish this horse would have drawn a little bit more to the inside here. Chunk of Gold is in the 19 of 20. How can he get all the way over and save ground in this particular spot? He's going to have to let the field kind of clear out. And if that's the case, he might be a little farther off the pace, or a lot farther off the pace than maybe what his running lines suggest. And again, when we talked about Chunk of Gold, where we think he might be in this particular race, he's right at the end of that mid-pack group and right in front of the deep, deep closers. But if they want to get to the rail and save ground, Chunk of Gold might have to be back another slot or two to kind of get over there, or else he'll be hung wide on the turns. And if he's hung wide on the turns, a horse like that I don't think is good enough. I don't think Chunk of Gold is good enough to go 3-4 wide on the first turn, 3-4 wide on the second turn, and get a piece of the Kentucky Derby. He's got to get that don't give a damn ride on the inside from Jareth Loveberry, and it might happen. You say, look, I mean, how can you predict that would happen? How can you predict Sonny Leone's going to win the Derby? Brian Hernandez, and Calvin Burrell. When Calvin Burrell started winning Derbies, nobody thought Calvin Burrell was winning Derbies. People thought that Carl Nafsker was crazy for keeping him on Street Sense, but it worked, and then he kind of made the reputation. But he's a wild cowboy. Really the Cajun cowboy, and but he had that rail style, and I think that rail run on Derby Day has been successful over the years. whoever gets that trip could be very interesting in the Kentucky Derby. Chunk of Gold maybe want to get it because of Jareth Loveberry. And again, his first Derby ride was 2 fills, which he almost won the sucker with a tremendous effort from a very tough post. 2 fills was down on the inside. I want to say it was either the 2 or the 3, and kind of had to overcome a lot of congestion. And it was an excellent ride by Loveberry in that one. Maybe he gives Chunk of Gold an interesting long shot look. So while we talked overlays and underlays in this segment, it's also basically long shots, right? Long shots and maybe horses you want to toss at shorter prices. But a couple long shots for sure. Final Gambit and Chunk of Gold would be 2 if you're looking for some bombers maybe to get on your ticket. Let's go to our 4th topic this week on It's Official. I know we're running a little longer than usual, but it is the Kentucky Derby and Oaks weekend. A little talk about the Kentucky Oaks right now. We talk about Good Cheer. She's won 6 in a row. She's going for 7 straight. She's never been defeated. Trainer Brad Cock has had success here in the Kentucky Oaks in recent years. He'll try to do it again with the 6-5 morning line favorite, Good Cheer. We had her on the track in recent days. Let's get a look at her working out here. Good Cheer is going to work in company with a workmate here for the Brad Cox stable. Cox had such a strong hand this year with the 3-year-old fillies going towards the Kentucky Oaks. Remember, he had the undefeated Breeders' Cup champion last year, Immersive. She had some bone bruising reportedly and was put on the sidelines back in, I want to say, early January when they decided to pull the plug on her 3-year-old campaign. Along the way, there were horses like Eclatant who decided they were going to keep her going shorter. There was Mohema, a major stakes winner for Brad Cox. And then Good Cheer was just rising above all of them. She's won all 6 races. She hasn't won particularly fast. So your speed figure aficionados are trying to say she may be particularly vulnerable in this spot. But when you look at the races she's run to this point, Good Cheer, 6 wins, 6 starts. She's by Medaglia d'Oro out of Wedding Toast. Of course, Medaglia d'Oro, the sire of the great Plum Pretty, an Oaks winner. Also, the great legend, Rachel Alexandra, most famously. So we know Medaglia d'Oro gets great 3-year-old fillies. This filly's never been tested. Her closest race is 2.5 lengths in last year's Goldenrod, where she beat Quiet Side. Quiet Side's one who could be an upset possibility in this year's Kentucky Oaks, but drew the 14 hole and comes out of a couple really tough throwdown races. So when we look at the Kentucky Oaks field, Quiet Side is a logical horse that you might look at, as one of the next up options in there. But again, a very tough post and coming out of a strenuous race last time in the fantasy stakes. So do you want to take second price kind of favoritism maybe on number 14 Quiet Side? Third choice in the line at 8-1, but may take a little more action than that. Lacara is the 6-1 second choice in the morning line. Lacara's coming off essentially a wire-to-wire every step victory in the Ashland Stakes last time out at Keeneland. She got her way that day, 1:12-2 for the first 6 furlongs. This should be a little bit better tempo in this year's Oaks, but not an overwhelmingly fast pace. And that's why I think a horse you might want to keep an eye on here is 5G. 5G is a horse who went wire-to-wire in the Gulfstream Park Oaks last time. Prior to that, ran against Quiet Side on the road in the Honeybee and took that one to the wire at Oaklawn. Now, basically, 5G and Quiet Side get to meet on a neutral track. And I think 5G with more tactical speed, a good post position in the 8-hole, very interesting at 12-1 in the Kentucky Oaks and drawn right outside Lacara. So there's not a ton of speed in this race. Maybe the 2 Simply Joking shows a little bit of pace, but I think the speed in here is the 2, the 7, and the 8. Lacara gets the rough go, maybe being between horses. 5G gets the stalk, and if the 2 doesn't get out of there, Simply Joking, you could be looking at a nice, a nice pace scenario in here for 5G, the 8, and that's where I'm leaning towards in the Kentucky Oaks. We'll have final picks for the Oaks, the Derby, and all the races in our Thursday podcast when Scott Shapiro joins me for the First Call podcast. We do that each Friday during the racing season, but we do it on Thursday this week because of Kentucky Oaks Day being on Friday. We'll get my final picks there, but I can tell you right now, 5G, my top pick in the Kentucky Oaks. Looking forward to that. In our 5th and final topic this week, the undercards are absolutely loaded Friday and Saturday at Churchill Downs. A quick run through of a couple of the stars that are going to be in action. Friday's card includes, you see her right there, last year's Kentucky Oaks winner, Torpedo Anna, now age 4, the reigning horse of the year. She's going to get her toughest career test. And I say this even knowing she ran in the Travers last year against the boys, because Chad Brown's got 2 in the La Troyenne Stakes. He's got a speed runner, and he's got the late running Raging Sea. This is the best older filly and mare I think Torpedo Anna is going to face in this kind of situation. with the pace help in there with randomized, I think Torpedo Anna is going to be stretched to her limit. She's won both of her starts so far this year at Oaklawn, but she hasn't done it in a dominant fashion, and she's coming back on pretty short rest. She just ran 3 weeks ago in the Apple Blossom. I think she's vulnerable in the La Troyenne. Raging Sea versus Torpedo Anna. Interesting one on Friday. Maybe one of the races of the year early in the older handicap division is the Ali Sheba Stakes. Fierceness and Locked, 2 Todd Pletcher trainees latching onto each other in this race. Fierceness we haven't seen since last year's Breeders' Cup, was runner-up for champion 3-year-old. Beaten favorite in the Kentucky Derby. Does he have an issue with Churchill Downs, or was it just a bad day in the Derby for him? We'll find that out in his first start as a 4-year-old. He goes against his stablemate Locked. Locked this year has already won the Santa Anita Handicap and was a good second to White Abarrio in that runaway victor's Pegasus World Cup. So Locked and Fierceness in a deep edition of the Ali Sheba, where Hall of Fame and some others in there merit a look. And one of the most impressive 3-year-old fillies on the turf last year comes back at 4 in the Modesty. She feels pretty for Cherie DeVoe. Can't wait to see this one go. She can really pick it up and lay it down. If she's going to be a star in the older filly and mare turf division this year, her campaign gets started in the Modesty Stakes on Friday. Now on Saturday, a couple undercard races of note. You've got the big turf race, of course, the Turf Classic leading into the Kentucky Derby. But before that, on the undercard, 2 really good dirt sprints to keep an eye on. Nisos, you see pictured here, undefeated for Bob Baffert. He would have been one of the favorites for the Kentucky Derby. Baffert ineligible. You wonder how Nisos would have went to the Preakness last year if he had stayed healthy. But he went on the sidelines. 3 wins, all by dominant margins. He's back for the first time in about a year, and he takes on Mindframe, just an absolutely strong performer for the Todd Pletcher barn now. Nisos against Mindframe, really the Churchill Downs handicap, one to watch on Saturday. And amongst the filly and mare sprinters, it doesn't get any better than this. Vava and Ways and Means from the Midwest, Cherie DeVoe, Chad Brown, fillies and mares coming out of the Breeders' Cup. They rematch in the Derby City Distaff against the West Coast Blazer Copion for trainer Richard Mandela. She's not always good, but when she's good, she's great. So if Copion brings her A game, Vava, Ways and Means at her could put on quite a show. The Derby City Distaff, one of the undercard races on Saturday at Churchill Downs. We thank you for joining us this week on the It's Official podcast. Each and every week, we take on 5 hot topics in horse racing. Next week, we'll be back on Tuesday to review the Kentucky Derby and look forward to another big racing week, which gets us right into Preakness mode by this time a week from now. So be sure to join us next Tuesday for that. And between now and then, we'll have a podcast for you on Thursday with all the final handicapping. Today, we went through all the different strategies, how to deliver and dive deep into these past performances and videos that we've seen and whittle your picks down. On Thursday's podcast, when Scott Shapiro joins me, we'll give you the straight-up picks that we have for many of the major races. Also, if you want to get my picks for Kentucky Derby Day, sign up at Substack, jeremyplonk.substack.com. We'll have some content going out for you on Kentucky Derby Day. And be sure to go to the first Kentucky Derby Wager Guide online now. You can access it for free. Go to news.first.com. or news.first.com, and you can click on the wager guide link there for the first Kentucky Derby wager guide. Plenty of great information in there. Michelle Yu will be updating later today on Tuesday her final picks for the Kentucky Oaks and wagering strategies. On Wednesday, the update will be Jeff Siegel back with his Kentucky Derby pick. You'll get it first in the Express Bet and First Bet wager guide. Jeff Siegel's Kentucky Derby pick will be announced on Wednesday with his video and handicapping strategies, as well as those from Millie Ball of First TV and Santa Anita, and myself will be added into the wager guide with our Derby picks tomorrow. So be sure to check that out and access it. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week. Run for the Roses this Saturday at Churchill Downs. Good luck, everybody.